Namaste. Welcome to the Advaita channel. I just have to wait for a second so I can pause YouTube. Namaste, Bhagavati. Okay, I'm here. So I'm here today to read the Song of Ribhu, and I'm very happy and grateful to be here and to be able to share it with you like this. I really love it very much. And yeah, so just before we start, I just want to say that I'm at the feet of my master, Mujiji and Anantaji, and that's all. I don't really know what words to use, but I've used those ones. So. Okay. And like at the start of this book, it says like the whole first chapter is obeisances to Shiva, obeisance to the Supreme Shiva. Okay, I'm going to read just the first verse of the Ribhu Gita for this purpose. Obeisance to the Supreme Shiva. To that Supreme Shiva, the auspicious, the absolute, who is unreservedly worshipped in the hearts of the five-faced Lord, the six-faced Lord, and the gracious Mother, and their endless retinue, along with innumerable seers, gods, and other loving devotees, for attaining any result and for having bestowed upon them their desires. Who is undivided like the expanse of the sky, who is an ocean of compassion, who is the space of consciousness. Let us bow. So for me, that extends to and includes and is the same as bound to Muji and Ananda. Okay, so I'm not really sure what part to read. So Bhagavati, seeing as you're the only one who's here with me, if you have a suggestion or a preference of something you'd like to hear, you can let me know. Otherwise, I might just like open it randomly. Although a chapter just popped into my head. There, so I'm gonna read that. Let's see what this one is. Almost every word in this, or maybe not almost every word, but every word is just really saying the same thing, and it's just pointing to yourself all the time. Namaste, Ananta. Thank you for being here. Okay. So it looks like I'm going to read this chapter, chapter 29. And if you'd like me to read some other chapter that you know about, you can tell me. Constant meditation on the nature of pure reality. There is no object that is real, ever. Whatever is seemingly real is all completely illusory. When measured by reasoning and such, even that illusoriness is only the substratum. The Supreme Brahman, the substratum, the illuminator of the sun and other luminaries, is the only reality. This is the natural revelation of the crest of the Rig and other Vedas, and we shall explain here. Whoever hears and understands this will attain liberation. There is not the least doubt about this. Of this world, which is an illusory superimposition on consciousness, There is nothing real or unreal. It is only the substratum, which is the not to be ignored reality, that appears as the imaginary reality of superimposition. If the imaginary reality is inquired into, it is seen to be undoubtedly of the reality of the substratum. Okay, I'm not going to read that bit. I'm going to read. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to read chapter 32, and I'm not really sure why, but I just have. Okay. So this chapter is called Attaining the Nature of the Supreme by the Bhava attitude or conviction of oneself being the supreme reality. Nidaga, I shall further clearly tell you about the definition of the undivided truth, that there is not a thing apart from Brahman, that all that is there is the undivided supreme Brahman, and that we are that Brahman without a second. This exposition, which is given now, will immediately confer liberation. It will infuse joy and erase fatigue. It will make one be by oneself that Brahman. There is not an atom which can be said to be a thing apart. The self is the eternal, indestructible truth. The partless self is, indeed, of the nature of Brahman. Brahman is, indeed, of the shining nature of the self. In the certitude, as explained, that I am the supreme Brahman, which is not different from the self, and being rid of the affliction of the misery of birth and death, be ever the one supreme Brahman. When inquired into, what is seen as all is nothing but Brahman. Existence, consciousness, bliss, and nothing apart in the least. What exists always is the supreme Brahman alone, the expanse of consciousness. Brahman without a second is your nature. There is not a shred of doubt in this. Hence, be of the conviction, Bhava, without a doubt, that all is Brahman, and that I am, and thus attain peace. I indeed am Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. I indeed am Brahman, the holy, perfectly full. I indeed am Brahman, the ever auspicious. I indeed am Brahman, the all-pervasive, the immaculate. I indeed am the undivided supreme Brahman. I indeed am the non-dual supreme Brahman. I indeed am the pure supreme Brahman. Being of such bhava, conviction or attitude, be relieved of weariness and be happy. I indeed am Brahman, which is a mass of bliss. I indeed am Brahman, without a trace of ignorance. I indeed am Brahman, which is endless. I indeed am Brahman, which stands exclusively as the truth. I indeed am Brahman, which is like the sky. I indeed am Brahman, which has no boundaries. I indeed am Brahman, which is established in silence. Being of such conviction, without delusion, be liberated. I indeed am ever the peaceful supreme Brahman. I indeed am Brahman, which is totally devoid of distinguishing marks. I indeed am Brahman, which has no mind or such. I indeed am Brahman, which is of the nature of consciousness alone. I indeed am Brahman, of the fourth state, which has no attachments. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which transcends the fourth state. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which has no bondage. Being of such conviction, Bhava, again and again, become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am Brahman, which has not the least concept. I indeed am Brahman, which has neither sorrow nor joy. I indeed am Brahman, which has no debilitating delusion. I indeed am Brahman, which has no state of Mahat, cosmic consciousness, or an intermediate stage in creation before the appearance of individual jivas and such. I indeed am Brahman, which has none of whatever appears to exist here. I indeed am Brahman, which is one and completely perfectly full. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is partless. Being of such bhava, conviction or attitude, again and again, become yourself the Supreme. Namaste, Peke. Very glad that you can be here as well. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which pervades all as all. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is spread out everywhere equally. I indeed am Brahman, which is not mixed up with action or such. I indeed am Brahman, which transcends time and such. I indeed am Brahman, which has no triad of any kind. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is the steadfast reality. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is the Supreme Shiva. Being of such bhava, conviction or attitude, again and again become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is eternal. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which has none of the travails of transmigration. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is not in the least tainted. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is greater than the greatest. I indeed am Brahman, which is the undivided expanse. I indeed am Brahman, which has neither beginning nor end. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which has no attachments. Being of such bhava, conviction or attitude, again and again become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, the ancient. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which flourishes as the perfect fullness. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is afflictionless. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is without qualities. I indeed am Brahman, which has neither night nor day. I indeed am Brahman, which has neither light nor darkness or such. Being of the bhava, conviction or attitude, that I am the Supreme Brahman, which is higher than the highest, become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am Brahman, which has no illusory conditionings. I indeed am Brahman, which is the blemishless awareness. I indeed am Brahman, which is indicated by the word that. I indeed am Brahman, which is indicated by the word you. In the Mahavakya or aphorism Tatvamasi, that you are. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is the merging in identity. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is the undifferentiated meaning. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which has no diverse differences. Being of such bhava, again and again, become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is established as truth. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is established as eternal bliss. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is established full of consciousness. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is established as the expanse of consciousness. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which remains filled with itself. I indeed am Brahman, which has nothing apart from itself. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is not manifold. Being of such bhava, conviction, attitude, again and again become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is without connections and is without attachments. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is unwavering and motionless. I indeed am the spotless Supreme Brahman, which shines undiminished. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is changeless and eternal. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is the One and which is omnipresent. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is devoid of anything. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is unfragmented. Being of such bhava, conviction, attitude, again and again become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am Brahman, which is beyond the reach of words and such. I indeed am Brahman, which is beyond the reach of the world. I indeed am Brahman, which is untouched by the bewildered mind. I indeed am Brahman, which is blemishless and clear. I indeed am Brahman, which is the clarity of the pure mind. I indeed am Brahman, which is the self-luminous light. I indeed am Brahman, which is without bondage. Being of such bhava, conviction or attitude, again and again become yourself the Supreme. I indeed am the veilless Supreme Brahman. I indeed am the ever pure Supreme Brahman. I I indeed am the Supreme Brahman with no trace of movement or non-movement. I am indeed the Supreme Brahman, which is devoid of the world, the individual, Jiva, and the Supreme Para. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is unequaled and which is unequaled and equipoised. I don't know what equipoised means, but I usually don't really mind if I know all the words. So I hope you don't mind either. Namaste, Nitya. I'm very glad that you're here. Thank you. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which stands alone by itself. I indeed am the Supreme Brahman, which is the high and the low. Being of such bhava, conviction or attitude, again and again become yourself the Supreme. If you are not continuously of such bhava, conviction or attitude, The distortions of the restless mind will not cease. Is it not the distortion of the restless mind that gives rise to the misery of this world? Tell me, how will the mind's real nature, whole and faultless, be impressed upon the understanding of those who have not had the distortion of their mind destroyed by such deep daily bhava? How will the wearisome bondage of worldly existence be loosened for those who wander about without being established in their own nature? Howsoever they try, the base bondage of worldly existence can never be destroyed for those who have not found their true nature. As the wrong understandings of the restless mind are resolutely destroyed, for those who adopt an unwavering bhava, their natural state will result, without any taint or veiling or confusion. Hence, all differences due to mental delusion should be demolished completely, and the state of the undivided nature established, by always practicing the bhava, conviction or attitude, of the undivided absolute. That bhava itself will not arise in the minds that are not of an inquiring nature. The non-inquiring mind is the enemy because of which people get submerged in the ocean of the birth-death cycle. Knowledgeless non-inquiry is the abode of ignorance. It will hide from sight the knowledge that can confer endless blessings. Instead, it will project an insurmountable imagination. It will not let one abide in the perfectly full nature. It is the seed without a peer for all overwhelming fear. In a trice, it will accumulate sankalpa, concept, fixed ideas, and vikalpa, doubt, difference, imagination, and a million modifications of the mind. Why dilate upon this? Non-inquiry will drown everyone in the sea of worldly misery. There is no greater enemy anywhere equal to non-inquiry. Therefore, conquer this enemy, non-inquiry, by the inquiry into the undivided absolute, and attaining undivided knowledge by your bhava, conviction or attitude, be of the nature of mere truth. What is this inquiry into the undivided absolute? Who am I? What is this world? What is in this? What is the supreme truth? Asking of the Sadguru, true Guru, thus, and by Vedanta, having the certitude of Brahman and the truth that I am Brahman, the world is Brahman, and whatever exists anywhere is the undivided supreme Brahman, is the inquiry. Taking refuge in the presence of the Sadguru, true Guru, and resorting to the company of good souls here and there, and attaining steadfast certitude of the Supreme, knowing that all is of the nature of the attributeless Supreme Brahman, and that that is ourselves. That is the truth. That the undecaying Brahman indeed is the purport of all Vedanta, is the inquiry that eliminates all weariness. Being firmly established, as just described, in unmixed Vedanta, until all one's doubts that cover the supreme reality are removed, and reasoning by means of various arguments with a concentrated mind, that the supreme Brahman is all this, that we are that, and that the illusory world is that. That is the truth, and coming to this firm conclusion by wise discernment is the inquiry. It is only knowledgeable inquiry, that will destroy ignorance and effectively dispel all illusion. Enrich the mind with spotless knowledge. Efface all fancy of imagination. Establish one in the perfectly full nature. Remove the intractable fear of mundane misery. Turn impending danger into good fortune, and destroy all the modifications of the mind. It is only for the good souls of the inquiring mind, who have determined that all is the proven Supreme Brahman, and that this pure Brahman is ourselves, that the Bhava, conviction attitude, of being the Supreme will arise. How can such faultless Bhava arise? For those weighed down with an adverse, non-inquiring mind, that considers I am the body and such, and all this apparent world is real. That was in American. Hence, it is only for the inquiring heroes that the fickle mind can be firm in that Bhava. Delusion of the mind will decrease, day by such blemishless Bhava. When the delusion is fully destroyed, the presence of the Supreme Brahman will be fully attained. Then the base bondage of worldly existence will be wholly rent asunder, and the limitless bliss of liberation follow. When inquired into all the diverse differences of the world, the individuals, and the Supreme, superimposed in their multiplicity on the Supreme Brahman, the truth, will be found to be nothing apart from the Immaculate Brahman itself. As it is only the Supreme Brahman, the self of all, that ever changelessly exists. Be of the steadfast Bhava, conviction or attitude, that I, indeed, am the Supreme Brahman, which is permanent, and be rid of uncertainty. There is nothing as the created, the existent and the destructible. Brahma, the creator, Hari, the sustainer, Hara, the destroyer. Nescience, the individual, the mind, the bondage. This picture of a world, the Lord, Ishvara, and delusion. All that exists is only the undivided Supreme Brahman. Being again and again of the Bhava, conviction attitude that I am that, become yourself the Supreme. There is nothing as the Vedas, the scriptures, the treatises, the subtle Vedantic tomes, the Itihasas, epics, Puranas, mythology, Agamas, treatises concerning temples and ritual techniques, such as Kamika, being the one alone or being the jewel. All that exists is only the undivided Supreme Brahman. Being again and again of the Bhava, conviction or attitude, that I am that expanse of Supreme Brahman, become yourself the Supreme. The body and such that are the seen are only non-self. The seer only is yourself. The one Supreme Brahman is yourself. It is, indeed, ever myself. All appearances, such as the Guru and the disciple, are the pure Supreme Knowledge, are all indeed the indivisible Absolute, and that am I. By such Bhava, become yourself the Supreme. The divisions, such as the fivefold deities, the divisions, such as their fivefold activities, heaven and hell, Mount Kailasha and the world, the gradations of the world, the individuals and the Supreme, All such manifold appearances are indeed only the indivisible Supreme, and that I, myself, am. By such bhava, become yourself the Supreme. Smell and various other senses, the fivefold elements such as space and such, the inevitable cycle of cause and effect, the pursuit of enjoyment and liberation, all such limitless differences, which are a manifestation of mental misconception, are only the Supreme, devoid of bondage, and that I myself am. By such bhava, become yourself the Supreme. But for thought there is no phenomenal world. Thought it is that appears as the phenomenal world. But for thought there is no birth-death cycle. Thought it is that appears as the birth-death cycle. When inquired into, thought is found to be consciousness alone. Thought as consciousness remains as beatitude. I indeed am that beatitude full of thought-free consciousness. Contemplating thus, become yourself that blessed state. But for the mind, there is not an atom of this world. Mind it is that appears as all the world. This mind is just of the nature of sankalpa, concepts, ideas. When inquired into, sankalpa, concepts and ideas, will be found to be consciousness. If the sankalpa, concept ideas of the mind is found to be as consciousness, mind itself will be found to be consciousness, which itself is peace, indeed. Contemplating thus, I am that peace, the originless consciousness. Become peace yourself. By Nietzsche. As the mind arises in me, filled with consciousness, abides in me, filled with okay. As the mind arises in me, filled with consciousness, abides in me, filled with consciousness, and subsides in me, filled with consciousness. There is nothing of the mind apart from me, filled with consciousness. As there is no mind apart from me, filled with consciousness, there is nothing else that exists apart from me, full of consciousness. I myself, filled with consciousness, I am the beatitude. Contemplating thus, become yourself the beatitude. I'm just going to see what beatitude means. Kind of have an idea, but I'll just see. A state of supreme happiness. I myself, filled with consciousness, I am the beatitude. Contemplating thus, become yourself the beatitude. Apart from me, filled with consciousness, there is no appearance of the world whatever, which is a consequence of sankalpa, fixed ideas, concepts or fixed ideas. Apart from me, filled with consciousness, there are no individuals or Lord, Ishvara, which are consequences of sankalpa, concepts. Apart from me, filled with consciousness, there is never any consequence of sankalpa, none at all. I, filled with consciousness, am ever beatitude. Contemplating thus, become beatitude yourself. Just as the world and others seen in a dream in me, filled with consciousness, are nothing apart from me, the world and others seen in me during waking, filled with consciousness, are nothing apart from me. I, filled with consciousness, abide as the One, ever the One, established as all the perfectly full, pervasive beatitude. I, filled with consciousness, abide as myself. Contemplating thus, become beatitude yourself. Being again and again of the Bhava, conviction or attitude, as declared here, always and continuously, that the divisionless Supreme Brahman is all, and I am that indivisible Supreme Brahman. Cast off delusion, and thus attain that undivided supreme knowledge, which has nothing apart from it. And enjoying that undivided supreme bliss, and being rid of all the debilitating misery of this world, become yourself of the nature of the blemishless Supreme Brahman. Not an atom anywhere at any time is apart from Brahman of the nature of awareness. All, indeed, is the perfectly full Supreme Brahman. You also, indeed, are the perfectly full Supreme Brahman. The meaning of all that has been expounded is true. There is not the least doubt about this. By knowledge, nourished by courage, be steadfastly clarified as explained here, and be rid of doubts. All is one completely, perfectly full Brahman. I am one completely, perfectly full Brahman. Those who ever have this bhava, conviction attitude, with discernment, will themselves be the Supreme Brahman of the nature of awareness. As expounded by the partless Supreme Shiva, I have explained the undivided truth to you, Nidagha. Those who understand this as explained will attain happiness. Those who have the bhava that the Supreme Shiva, present everywhere, without a pause, in the form of the great Linga, is I, will totally bereft of all the misunderstandings of the mind. Attain the clear, undivided, supreme knowledge, and attain the changeless state of liberation. Thus did Ribhu, the sage of clear vision, uncontaminated by the eye infection, graciously explain the undivided truth to Nidagha. It is the undivided form of our God of gods in a state of joyous dance that proclaims, there is not an atom apart from the Supreme Reality, which is all-pervasive. All is the Supreme Reality, which is existence, consciousness, bliss, and blemishless. And those who have the perfectly full knowledge that we are that reality are the liberated. That's all I'm going to read. I just love the Song of Ribhu so much. I feel like, I don't know, it's beautiful. So thank you for being here with me. And somehow it feels very good to share it here with you as well. So thank you. Ananta Ji ki Jai. Muji Ji ki Jai. Thank you so much.